Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Rebecca Finlayson Harper, and this is Let's Talk Family Civility. And I'm so honored to have these two amazing women on the show. We have Dr. Sonya Robinson and Mrs. Jackie Edwards. How are you? Dr. Sonya Robinson received her BBA with a dual emphasis in management and marketing from Baker College in Flint. So Sonya served as a senior manager for Fortune 500 company with over 44 years of experience. Sonya epitomizes the think customer mentality and was recognized as a key leader for spearheading General Motors on-time supply and delivery commitments by the United States Secretary of Defense, among other dignitaries. See what I tell you? I'm very honored. She embarked on a new journey when she was awarded the Black Belt Speaker Sharing My Voice Award. Since then, she's gone on to become an international speaker, published author, coach, and mentor. Sonya has just completed her book, Communication Mastery and Why It Matters. And in collaboration with the book, Sonya launched a national proclamation entitled International Day of Mastering Conversations That Matter, which is always recognized yearly on the 17th of April. She was featured co-author of Live Your Best Life, Walk by Faith, and interviewed by Damon Davis on the national one-on-one television program. Sonya was honored as a recipient of the I Change Nation's Women Add Value Award. And then shortly after, she would reach a pinnacle moment as she was chosen as a featured speaker at an international empowerment event and interviewed on Science TV while in Nairobi, Kenya. Sonya was named as one of the 2020 Global Voices of Change for using her voice for impacting change around the world. And we definitely need change right now. So thank you so much, Dr. Sonya Robinson, for being on the show. And we have equally amazing Mrs. Jackie Edwards, who is the manager for assessment and interventions for Federal Correctional Services of Canada.
I told you people always say service.
and just as important, the first female president of the Association of Black Law Enforcers of the world, because it doesn't have Canada members. We have members of ABLE, also known as ABLE, from the UK, the Caribbean, and the United States. She is born from ABLE, as she won a scholarship from ABLE, and she studied immigration and then went on to Correctional Service of Canada. And she has her passion for an association to where it brought her to being the first female president. Thank you so much, both of you, for being on the show for such an important topic. I know it's a sensitive topic, and I know we're going to get to the nit and gritty because of the so many perspectives that the three of us women have. So let's start with Dr. Robinson. What is your take on not just, we all know what happened to George Floyd was horrendous, but it's not the first time it's happened. And what is your take on the riots and the reaction and why such a drastic reaction? And then the same question to you, Jackie.
Okay, let me go a little further than that. Today, we're facing two viruses. We're facing coronavirus 19, the pandemic, and we're facing coronavirus 20, racism. And when I say that, I'm telling you, Saturday, I cried all day on this. But it made me think back to when my son was young. And when my son was 5, we moved to where we currently reside right now. And he was in a predominantly white school. Matter of fact, you could count, the blacks on one hand, which was about 6. And so when he was in school, the kids used to tease him. And my conversation with him went sort of like this. Lewis, his name was Lewis. The Declaration of Independence was drafted in 1776, and it stated that all men are created equal. They're no better than you. If you were to slash your hand, everybody's going to bleed red. Mm-hmm. But, right now, because of all the colors, we're just rainbows, but everything else is the same. So don't make you feel any less, than they are, because you're the same. So that was the first conversation. And then as we progress, the second conversation went a little like this. I would tell him, no matter what happens, you need to always tell me the truth. When you tell me the truth, I know how to deal with it. But don't let me walk up in some place and then get hit with something that you did not share. So no matter how bad it gets, tell me the truth. Mm-hmm. So then, here comes 16 years old when they're starting to drive. And then teenage boys, they like to go to the basketball court and play basketball. So then the conversation went like this. Louis, if you ever stop by the police, you do whatever they tell you to do. If they tell you to lay on the ground, you lay on the ground. But you always keep your hands on the steering wheel in front of them. Don't make any sudden moves. And if it's night and there's no lights, you keep driving, but you call 911 and tell them you are going to pull over. You're just trying to find a lighted spot to do that. So I was a single mom, but this is the conversation that I had to have with my son. Here we are 34 years later, and we're still doing the same thing. It's a little worse now, because if you look back at February, we had the Aubrey was his last name, 25 years old, unarmed, jogging through the neighborhood.
Yes.
And he was shot by a father and son for no reason.
Yeah.
Then here comes May 25th. Well, let me go back. We had Breonna Taylor, who was shot up in her home, and she was shot 8 times, and she's at home in the bed for no apparent reason, because the police made the assumption that there were packages being dropped off at her place by, for 2 other guys, but they found nothing. So now here comes May 25th, and we have Mr. Floyd, who is pinned down in the street, his face on the asphalt. The police's knee is in his neck. And you hear him whispering, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Officer, I can't breathe. But when he said mother, I'm telling you, every African mother heard that cry. And I can just about reassure you, it impacted all of them, because they thought of their son.
It hurt me. And yes. I know I am not, and this is where I'm going to talk later on. I know I'm not in the same scenario. I know and I have to sit and have this conversation with my son and say, you are lucky, and you have to appreciate how lucky you are that you don't face this.
Yes.
And the thing is, he doesn't understand, because we grew up in a country that is predominantly Black. We were the minority. And we weren't allowed certain opportunities because we could pay for it, supposedly pay for it, or we had certain things. And I said, yes, but at all times you were safe.
Yes.
Even in a country where we were a minority. And this is a conversation that as a white mother, I need to have with my children, to the point where I say, because my kids don't see color. Mm-hmm. So they can't understand it. And I said, Benjamin, that's why I want you to be a judge. I said, I want you to not see color and be in a position to make change. Right? Because you can get into that position. And you have that power to get into that position, to use your power for others.
Yes.
Because white privilege is still white privilege when you stand back and say, well, I feel bad, and that's all you do. Mm-hmm. That has to stop.
Yes.
So continue. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. So the same day that we had Mr. Floyd being murdered, right down the street from me, this lady and her husband, they were at their daughter's house, standing in front of the daughter's house. And there was a shot. The police asked them to leave. They refused. The police began hitting her in the head multiple times. And the other policeman took his stun gun and went to work on her husband. Not one time did they ask, why aren't you leaving, for them to say, that's my daughter's house and the kids are in the house and I want to make sure they're okay. None of that happened. So my point here is, what is the common denominator with all of this? And the common denominator to me is living while Black, because African-American males especially are being targeted, and they're being treated unjustly. And so What do we have now? What we actually have going on right now is what happened to Mr. Floyd is the last straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get it twisted. People aren't protesting because of the incident with Mr. Floyd, even though that is a cause. But that is not why the protest is going on. The protest is going on because of all the other things that have transpired year after year, month after month, with all these killings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've asked for help. The protest is a means of trying to have a conversation, but nobody's listening. Nobody's listening. So in order for us to get to the real solution, people have to be willing to sit down and talk. Now, let's take it a step further, because the riots, to me, are wrong. You know, I disagree with the looting. I disagree with, you know, the fires and everything else. And the one thing that I'm going to say, because they say, well, it's the agitators coming in. Okay, fine. But I can guarantee you not everybody is an agitator. But what I'm going to say to those people that live in that community, don't tear up your own home. Do not tear up your own home, because you have to go out there and go grocery shopping. You have to go out there and go to the barber shop, the beauty salon, restaurants, whatever. Would you tear up the house that you live in? No. Why would you tear up your community?
But also, it's changing the conversation. It's changing
Mm-hmm.
the conversation from being about George and about what is happening to now, oh, everybody's rioting and they're looting. So what
Mm-hmm.
will happen is, by the rioting and looting, you're benefiting those who want to change the conversation and hide themselves
Mm-hmm.
from the conversation. Now, Jackie, I'm gonna call Jackie and Sonia. We're friends. Jackie is one of my closest friends. Great support. Jackie, being a law enforcer, how do you feel? What is your take on what is going on, and what are the reactions, and why the reactions, and what happened recently in Toronto as well?
I want to, first of all, give thanks to our Lord and Savior. And I want to thank you so very much for providing this opportunity for us, Miss Sonya and I, to engage today. So I just want to thank, and I want to give him all the praise and glory, because it is his will, I believe, that's brought us here today. I absolutely agree with what Miss Sonya is saying. In terms of her points of references, we are at a very pivotal point in history right now. 2020 is a very pivotal point for so many reasons in this world, one of which is the conversation we're having today. We as a law enforcement practitioner, as a professional in the field of law enforcement services, part of what we do when we take an oath is we talk about service, but we also talk about protection. And I think that is what has invaded the world. The world saw what they saw in terms of Mr. Floyd and felt that he did not get the protection that he ought to have gotten. And people are speaking out right now because of something called fear. Everybody can relate to what happened. Everybody can relate to having a son, a brother, a cousin, an uncle, a father, a grandfather, any male figure in anybody's lives right now that share the pigmentation that Miss Sonya and I do, and I'm sure others that are here today. Anyone that shares that pigmentation was horrified by what they saw. But more than that is that the officers that were in close proximity to act chose not to act. And I think that is the shift that we need to make in the conversations that we need to have. Because the officer that was charged for his decision and his behavior has been apprehended. There has been a charge laid, and the system will address that, right? There's nothing we can really do anymore where that's concerned. But what about those folks that were the officers sworn to serve and protect, who were bystanders? They stood by and watched that. Why did they not act? Why didn't they not feel that they had a position to act? Because I can assure you, in my training as a law enforcement practitioner, I can assure you in my training and my understanding of my roles and responsibility, I have a responsibility to act if ever I find myself in the situation that those officers in close proximity of the incident were. Here in Canada, I think what you are seeing, what we're all seeing, we had actually about a 5,000 person march, protest is what I would call it, a protest. And everybody carried themselves appropriately, accordingly. There were no major incidents that came out of that particular event. And as Ms. Sonya was saying earlier, for me, I would say to people, why are you damaging your own community? Why are you damaging people's property that had nothing to do with the situation that you say has gotten you as upset as you are? I'd also like to bring in trauma. I think we've lost sight of that. We're talking race, we're talking racism, we're talking brutality, we're talking all sorts of things, but we're not talking trauma. Intergenerational trauma, where young Black men have watched their dads, their uncles, their grandfathers, their brothers, their cousins, their friends, subject to forms of brutality, forms of injustices. That is traumatic. And what we are seeing is that you have a traumatized group of people who now are reacting no different than somebody with post-traumatic stress. It's traumatizing. We have to provide opportunities for people to heal. We have to provide opportunities for people to voice their concern. And we have to provide opportunities for people to understand that they are understood. This is not just something that people got up yesterday and started to do. We've been fighting this issue. You talk about, white privilege. And I mean, there's some folks that look like me that also have had different walks of life who might not even understand what is going on. They too might not understand what's going on. We do have white individuals in this world, in our community, that do understand what is happening. And because the difference, though, and I've said this to a white colleague of mine the other day, the difference is that as a white individual, the shade of your skin does not change the trajectory of your life.
Yes.
That is the difference. That is the part of white privilege. Because a lot of white people will say, I've not done anything, Jacqueline, I've not, and many of them have not. In fact, a lot of them are even into biracial relationships. They have children that are biracial, that in the eyes of the law will be seen first as Black before they are biracial, so they have an invested, they're invested. But I say to them, the major difference is that the trauma of Black people,
the generational trauma,
the generational trauma of Blacks is probably one of the most unique in the category of trauma, because it is not what we have done that's caused the reaction.
Yeah.
If I have done something that warrants a reaction, if I don't know, I drive my vehicle beyond the speeding limit, I'm doing something to cause a reaction. But just by the color of my skin, simply because of the color of my skin, I am being treated different than, and often worse than, somebody else. That form of trauma is what we really need to look at. And that is what I think gets lost sometimes, and as Ms. Sonya talked about, in the looting and the other acts. Let's keep the conversation on what it truly is. And what it is that Blacks, racialized minorities are treated very differently, but not in a positive way, because we all discriminate. When we choose something over another thing, that's discrimination. Racism is putting somebody at a disadvantage simply because of the color of their skin, and the disadvantagedness, if you will, continues on and on and on and on and on. So yes, white privilege is something that needs to be discussed, reinforced, but again, it needs to be explained as to why it matters. And it matters because it does not often change the trajectory of your life in a negative way, as does being a person of color.
Agreed. And let's take the example of Indigenous in Canada and what they have been through, and yet there's reconciliation process. When I think about it, there has been no reconciliation talks, no healing talks to African Americans, African Caribbean, African Canadians. I mean, the culture has been amalgamated, right? You don't come from originally Christianity. You don't come from.
If I may, Rebecca, it is law.
Yeah.
It's not attitude that's changed for our Indigenous population. It's not our Indigenous peoples did not get to where they are because people decided that what they were doing was wrong and they were going to adjust accordingly. It took legislation. We have legislation that holds people to an accountability that makes them do the right thing. That, and then we have our Human Rights Act, and you know, I thank all involved in putting the Human Rights Act together, and you know, different charters, but the massive difference is that we don't have legislation in society that impacts or not even impacts, Ms. Sonya, you know what I'm trying to say? It doesn't hold that sense of accountability where there is actual consequences.
Right. So basically what we're lacking is a standard. Yeah. So if you look at it realistically, and I'm going to throw the NFL out there because I was talking to somebody today and they mentioned that to me. But if you throw the NFL out there, they have a standard that their players have to adhere to. And if they don't, you know, they just throw them out. There's no talk, no negotiations, no anything. But if we look at it realistically, what's going on today with our police force, and believe me, I'm not saying that all policemen are bad. You just have a few in there. But look at it from this standpoint. Once they put on that uniform, you forget everything else about them. Just like a woman, when she goes and puts on her makeup and she's dressing up, she's hiding every issue that she has underneath all of that. Yes. And basically, that's what you have with the police force, with certain people on that force. So what needs to be done is there needs to be a standard put in place that, you know, that they need to follow. And if they, for some reason, deviate from that process, then they need to be out of there. Because if you look at the policeman that was arrested, well, what are we hearing now? That this was not his first time. This is not the first time he's done that. And he's put his knee on other people's neck. Well, okay, why are you in that position? Again, you've put on that uniform and everyone else has dismissed what was going on underneath that uniform.
And I can agree with you more, Ms. Sonya, in terms of systemic racism, right? When it's built in, when it is allowed, it's when it is at its most dangerous. When we have an opportunity to hold people to account, when we have opportunities to, and we do not, because those standards are in there. Every police services has its standards. Every correctional service, it's already there. It's whether or not we act on it. As you said, with the example with the NFL, if you go out there and you go against the standards, you go against the rules, and we say, don't worry about it this time. Next time, oh, okay, you know what? Okay, this is your, you know, we know what you did, but we're going to, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. We need to be civil. We need to have that conversation to understand why people chose the wrong over the right.
Yes.
But some wrongs, there is no correcting it. It just needs to be held accountable.
Yes.
And moved on. So there are standards of operations, there's codes, there's, you name it, there's policies, my good God, there's laws.
Mm-hmm.
There are legislations that say if I operate a vehicle and I go beyond the maximum amount of kilometers or miles allowed, this is what's going to happen. And if a police officer allows me to break, not allows me, but if I break those laws and I am always excused or justified, that is going to become my norm now.
Right.
And the one police officer that pulls up and says, no, I am going to give you a ticket, all of a sudden, I'm the big bad wolf because I'm doing my job.
Mm-hmm.
I then become the exception. Well, the other 5 officers allowed me. No. The other 5 officers were not doing their jobs.
Because that's the first thought I had in my head when I watched the video, and I forced myself to watch it because my heart was just bleeding. And I said, no, I need to watch this, right? Because I cannot avoid it. I have to watch this as a human being. And I said, this man has gotten away with this before.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had that entitlement that I'm going to get away with this. I mean, people were videotaping him, and he still thought he could get away with it. People were shouting at him. And talk about trauma. The people who witnessed what was going on advocated for Mr. Floyd, who were advocating on the top of their lungs for Mr. Floyd. They need assistance, and the police should be offering them trauma informed practice, because they just witnessing it and that power taken away from them, that no matter what they said and what they pleaded, nothing changed, and this man died.
Right, but let's go back to the standards. Okay, so we do have standards, but if you look at from past experiences, it just seems like it's just a repeat.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I remember somebody saying, I can't breathe before.
Right. So it's like, well, who's monitoring who? Because some of the police you have, I'm just going along to get along. But then if you have different offenders doing the same thing, there's something wrong with the standards that are currently in place. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how do you fix that? I know right now there's probably a time where, okay, we just need to sit down and have this conversation about, okay, this is what's going on today, but we need to stop having these conversations and we need to start putting something in place to address the issues. And when we do that, it shouldn't just be the leaders at this point in time. What we need to be doing is bringing in some of the younger generation, because they're the ones that are going to be addressing this, later on. This is going to be them. This is whatever we put in place today will be addressed by the future generation. So they need to be coming to the table, as well as when, the conversations take place, mm-hmm. to draw up this process as to how it's going to work, the questions that are going to be asked, what's right, what's wrong, what do we need to improve upon? I mean, because whatever is in place today, obviously, is not working.
I don't think whatever is in place today is being utilized. And I think it's incumbent on us to demonstrate to the community how we have applied the standards.
Okay.
And I think that's where I would encourage us to go next, especially in my field of practice. Mm-hmm. Demonstrate to the community how we have applied the standard. The whole world is watching, mm-hmm. now, but this particular situation, again, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in Minneapolis. This particular situation no longer is about a standard of operation. This is now about a criminal investigation. Mm-hmm. But the police force does, in fact, still have the opportunity to demonstrate how they apply the standards and be able to have that conversation. Excuse me, ladies. Mm-hmm. Have that conversations with the community to demonstrate how it's utilized. I think that's where we go next. And that accountability, I think, will either confirm that those standards need to change, and if so, in what way, mm-hmm. or it'll confirm that it is being used. You know what I mean? But right now, I think that's the next step. is saying that under this circumstance, when this happens, this is what we've done.
Yeah.
And I think what it'll show is that the standards are not being applied.
Okay.
That and it goes from what we believe or what we interpret to actual facts. You can't deny the facts. Everybody saw
The fact.
everybody saw that. There's no denying that. That's an easy one. With all due respect to everybody involved, that's an easy one. It's the unknown that's happening day after day after day. This happens more often than not. The difference, ladies, is that now there's social media. People actually are in the back somewhere with a camera. I would encourage people, when they're videotaping wrongs like that, shut the dang camera off and dial 911. Shut the dang camera off and at least have it on record, or do both, because we don't want the camera.
We need to do both. We need to do both. We need to stop diagnosing what is wrong.
Yes.
And we need to start advocating for what is right.
Right. Exactly.
And in some cases, we need that video footage.
Yes.
In order to get our point across, because as I said in the beginning, if realistically, with what past history, they're not listening to what we have to say, and the videos are showing what we have to say. And even with the videos, sometimes they'll say, well, we still need to, investigate. We still need to do this. We still need to do that. And I'm like, but you got the videos. I mean, it's the same thing even with Mr. Floyd. After all that happened, instead of them taking him into custody right away, what did they say? Well, we still need to investigate. We still need to. And I'm like,
what, you need
to turn the man
video?
over and he wasn't breathing. I mean, we all saw that. And it's just like with these last three. I mean, if you are standing there watching, and two of them also were Mr. Floyd, and the other one standing there with his hand on his gun, it was like he was just afraid to say anything. It's like, well, I think we need to turn him over, this, that, and the other. And the answer was no. Okay, so help me. That's where I am. Help me. I don't understand why it's taking so long for these last three for them to do something.
So I'm going to flip the script a little, because in Jamaica, we have police brutality in Jamaica. And we don't have the uprising about it because we don't, unfortunately. But yes, a lot of times in Jamaica, police will kill citizens. Sometimes there are other things that say to happen, but I don't have the personal proof, so I'm not going to say it. But police brutality, or the power of the uniform, sometimes can corrupt the person. Or the wrong people take the power of the uniform to do wrong things, right? And one thing you said, Ms. Jax, is we have to not blame the uniform and categorize white policemen because that was just a bad man. And that's why I'm bringing up Jamaica. We have bad men and women putting on uniforms. And this is where we almost need to do a screening. Or you have 3 strikes, not even 3 strikes, 1 strike, you're out. The minute you cannot prove yourself as a humanitarian and somebody with civility, then you should not be allowed to wear that uniform.
Correct.
Well, Rebecca, those uniforms are issued. So when I get issued my uniform, no different than a physician, someone in dentistry, someone in whatever the field is, when you get issued that authority to carry out the duty that you've been asked to do, it comes with an expectation. Yeah. And when you defy, or when you breach or break those expectations, when you breach, we should be able to say, thank you very much. You no longer are authorized to don that uniform. Yeah. And I think, ladies, that's the next step in all of this. We cannot any longer continue to have the same conversation over and over and over again. No. When you stop adhering to the reason why you were given the uniform and the expectation of having received that uniform or that responsibility, we then need to go and say, Rebecca, you were given this uniform to serve, to protect, and we list everything. You signed an oath, you took an oath, and you signed a piece of paper that said that you are going to carry yourself this way. You have not lived up to your side of the deal.
Yeah.
So as a result, we are taking back your uniform and all that was issued in order for you to carry out your duty. And I understand and I respect our friends across the world that's probably listening to this, that they will say it's not that simple. It ought to be that simple.
That ought to be, yes.
It ought to be that simple because it was just that simple. You went through a certain expectation. Dr. Robinson, you went to school, you passed your test, you were given that distinction. And if you do not carry yourself based on that distinction, that is in a manner that you ought to, based on the distinction that was given to you, that distinction needs to be taken away. And I would say, no different than me as a law enforcement practitioner, that should be stripped of me because I did not live up to my side of the deal, of the bargain, of the oath of office that I took. And I'm going to encourage people who are advocating for change, people who are rallying, people who are saying enough is enough. My heart broke. Unlike you, Rebecca, I could not watch the video. The first time, the second time, I tell you, ladies, it took me a dozen attempts to watch the video from start to finish because my heart, as a human being, I don't think you have to be a mom. I don't think you have to be Black. I don't think you have to be anything other than a human being, for God's sakes, to be touched by what that man had to endure. But the God we serve, we know the God we serve will take care, and may his soul rest in peace. And may his family find a level of peace as they grieve the loss of a life, the loss of this man's life. And so, no, I think that everybody should be stepping up and saying that this is wrong. Racism does not need to be dealt with by you and I, Dr. Robinson. Miss Sonya, it's not you and I that should be the one voicing our concern. With all due respect, my sister Rebecca, it's people that look like Rebecca who are Caucasians. You understand me?
This is why I'm doing the show.
Who are the ones that are going to have to be, because they're at the table.
Yes, this is what I'm saying to my son. This is so let's bring it now back to family civility and conversations that matter, right? This is where we as parents, as me, as a white mother of white children, have to use this and say, no, you and I are going to stop this because we do have a privilege. We do sit at the table. So don't tell me, oh, it's not me. No, I don't want to hear it. I have had conversations with my white friends, and you bring up white privilege, and they're like, especially to even Jewish people. They're like, but we've been, I said, no, you know what? I hear you. Killed, and I'm Jewish. I know. I have, my daughter's taken me to synagogue on a Friday night, and all you hear is how strong we are because of all we've been through. But we do have an advantage of being white, because guess what? They can't look at us and tell us we're Jewish. Right? So we can hide. I know that my ancestors from Portugal dropped the Cohen, went to Henriquez, and fled to Jamaica. Yes. They fled from persecution during the Spanish Inquisition, but they could hide who they really were just by dropping a name.
Mm-hmm. Again, the color of their pigmentation does not change the trajectory of their future. Miss Sonya and I step in. If we leave a room, they might not know our names, but they will say the two Black women who were here today.
Yes.
When they say the white woman that was here today, the chances are you would not be the only white person in that room, Rebecca. But so they don't even have to remember our names. And I have an adult son right now, but when they were much younger, I would say to them, when something goes wrong, they don't need to know that you're Jermaine or you're Jamal. They will say the black guy.
Yeah.
The black guy that was here did it. Or yeah, we saw this black guy leave the mall or the school grounds or whatever the case may be. Rarely does something happen and somebody says, oh, yeah, there was a white guy in the back there. No. There was this guy, he was about 5'7". He had on a blue jeans and a white t-shirt, Never, when they're describing, do they say white first. But if they're describing a black individual, the first thing that comes out of that descriptor's mouth is what?
They're black.
The black.
That they're black.
And it goes a step further, even in your profession, Ms. Jax, is look at it. You say even in Canada, or a black man, 18 years old. And I'm like, hold on. When I met the person, I was like, oh, you're from Barbados. Oh, or you're from Jamaica. Oh, they have a whole cultural identity. They're not just black.
Yes.
And you cannot treat somebody from Barbados like treat like the whole attitude, just like white people come from different cultures and different backgrounds, so do black people.
Well, you'll have people.
Chinese. I don't even say Chinese. I say Asian because I don't know if they're from Japan or they're from Korea or they're from China.
You tell me, Miss Sonya, where you're from, but I know when I travel to the States, the first thing that they will say, oh, you're Canadian. You Canadian. I'm like, yeah. Usually I have something that says I'm Canadian, but they'll be like, Miss Canada, or, I love Canada. What part of Canada are you from? In Canada, when you say you're Canadian, they're like, yeah, but where are you really from? Pardon me? Well, no, but where are you?
Yeah.
Like they used to ask my children that. No, but where are you really from? And when they were younger, my kids would be like, Toronto? Yeah, but where? Like where? No, where are your parents from? And my son, my oldest son, Jermaine, he'd be like, man, what's that got to do with anything? What you asking me that for? Oh, I hear an accent. He says, boy, I don't got no accent.
Oh, I love that.
No accent. I was born and raised in Canada. I don't have any accent. Get out of here. And that was
and mine is always, and I'm in Michigan. Well, where are you from? What do you mean? Well, you have that Southern accent, so I'm from the South. Yeah. So they always pinpoint. So real quick, let me tell you a story, because when we talk about that, when my son was younger, he was riding the school bus, and they suspended him from school because they said he started a spitball fight. And so I'm like, well, help me understand who said he did. And they said the bus driver. And I'm like, well, the bus driver is driving the bus. And where was he sitting? They said in the back of the bus. And I'm like, well, how did she see from the front of the bus to the back of the bus? And then I said, that couldn't have been him. He wasn't at school that day. He was sitting there with me.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine.
And I'm sitting here like, okay. So now you're trying to say we all look alike.
Imagine.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious. I am serious.
I'm sure she is.
These things happen. And it gets back to like when you were talking about white privilege and you can help and sit at the table, and that's good. And I mean, and you just happen to not be one of those people.
You're right.
But realistically,
I feel so helpless.
I'm sorry.
I actually feel helpless. That's why I held this show, because I want to know how to help. And you said it, be at the table, keep the conversation going. But how can I help?
Here's the problem with being at the table. The people that should be at the table, to me, this is my opinion, you can't have the people at the table that are creating the problem.
Amen.
You can't do that. So you actually need to go out and find some people that are that have a different mindset. You need to have a diverse group at the table, because you need to be hearing from everybody. You can't have people at the table that are involved in this. It needs to be a diverse group, outside group. Jacqueline, your thoughts?
I completely agree with you. We have to be mindful of not bringing people at the table simply because of the pigmentation of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have people with the lived experiences.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have people who are solution-minded,
Yes.
who have actually tested and tried, and the examples that Ms. Sonya had given. We need to have those people at the table. The reason I made reference to the fact that we are not at these tables often, what happens is that those at the table will reach out to us for our ideas, for our experiences, for our expertise. And the narrative that they come up with is not reflective of the conversations that we have had with them.
At the table. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You
And I'm
really,
telling
you're
you,
like,
as
that's not what I said.
and
So-
as long as Americans keep
So you're saying, Miss Sonya, as a mother, I am doing the right thing by training my children as a white mother of white children, and I have to keep. That's very hard for me to say because growing up in Jamaica, it's like even I just don't. I don't consider myself white. I mean, honestly, I really don't. But
What is white, Rebecca? Can I ask you to answer this question?
Sure.
White, the mindset is what we're talking about, not your complex, not your complexion.
Being in Canada, it's now not that. That's that. So you talk about your experience being in Canada or where your parents from. I have the opposite, where I'm not asked. I'm assumed I'm Canadian and nothing more.
I hear you to open your mouth because I'm about to open my mouth. I'm like, what is white girl dropping this patois? White girl going on like she's Jamaican.
And that hurt me because when I was in Montreal at school, they thought I learned English from a Jamaican man. So I get as much as sleeping with them, but I don't get actually from there.
Well,
so my culture, my identity is stolen from me because of the color of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the point. I'm, Mr. Floyd is the priority of this conversation. But again, that's why I wanted this conversation because yes, I do think differently. I'm honored and that I have that transition between two cultures, and I feel, and that is a power I have to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for allowing me to be part of both cultures. But on the flip side, when I moved to Canada originally, I was exiled from both cultures. The Canadians didn't want me because I was white.
Yes.
And the Canadians were like, well, try get a job over the phone and try get a job with a heavy Jamaican resume.
Yes.
So I was like, where do I go? And I can have the animosity, or I can appreciate the fact that I have this power and a voice that I'm willing to use, but I need to know how to use it properly because, again, I may grow up in a culture, but I have not faced what a Black person has faced. I have not faced what a Black mother has faced in Canada or the US. And as I can speak to you about it and I can empathize, but I have not experienced it.
And nor will you
and
ever.
That's why you have to be at the table.
Nor will you ever. You will never know what it's like to be a Black mom.
Never.
You might have some understandings based on information provided. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we have to stop trying to do is be what we're not. Mm-hmm. You are first and foremost, you are a human being. I think we need to first and foremost be humans.
Yes.
Okay? Be humans, irrespective of our pigmentation, irrespective of whether we have children, irrespective of if we're married, single, divorced, whatever else comes after that. Let's go back to being civil and being human beings who have an understanding of what it means to be humane. And then we add the other layers in terms of understanding and in terms of coexisting with each other.
Right.
Sister Sonya is from a part of the world that I've not lived. I visited Michigan. I love Michigan. I'm a basketball coach. My daughter. Girl, yes. My daughter actually just accepted at another school, not in Michigan. Michigan was recruiting her, but yeah, go blue.
Yes, yes.
But so you live in a part of the world that I can't even begin to suggest that I know what it's like.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because here is a lot different than Canada.
Yes.
Canada, when I visit Canada, I mean, you see a lot of, well, when I was visiting Canada, you would see a lot of interracial couples walking down the street and nobody thought anything about it. It was nothing.
That's right.
Look at it over here. It's like, well, how does she get, how, what's going through their minds.
Yes.
And I'm like, can we just stop judging people?
Yes.
My thing is you have nothing to do with that. If that's what they want to do, that let them do it. That's none of your business.
Yeah.
My thing is let God judge them when they go where they go.
Amen.
You don't need to judge them.
Mhm.
That's not what we were put here for. Because as far as I'm concerned, we're all created equal. We all bleed red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so now, because we're coming out of time, although I would continue this for another hour if you had the time.
Oh,
because that's
is
what
it
I
an
love.
hour already?
It's 10 minutes to an hour. It's
Wow.
unbelievable. So I
It
don't
seemed like
mind
it was
going
going that
further. I
long.
don't mind continuing the conversation because this is a conversation that needs to be had. And those who are watching, please, text in, chime in.
Yes.
But based off a conversation that matters, which is your initiative. It's
Yes.
who you are, and there's a national day about it. Based off of that, what advice would you give to the world right now on what's happening? And again, I'm going back to it. Police brutality is, and I don't like to call it police brutality. It's again human beings, bad human beings, just like they're bad criminals. They're bad human beings. Bad people without a uniform are criminals.
Right.
So you could almost, I don't want to, I'll say it, but I don't want to say it, but criminals within a uniform.
Okay.
Right?
First of all, I don't want to label it like it's all of the police.
No.
It's only a select few. And I don't know how to reference that to say that it's not all of them. But my point is, I just think we need to come to the table, the decision makers, the problem solvers, whoever that may be. I don't think it needs to be the leaders from the law enforcement. No, it should not be all of them. Mm-hmm. I do think, we need to bring in some new, fresh ideas from different people. I do believe we need to bring some of the younger people to the table because, again, as I said, in the future, these are the people that are going to be leading the country. They need to be part of the solution. Mm-hmm. When I created Conversations That Matter, my rationale for doing it is I wanted to remove barriers to build connections. I wanted to be a part of the solution. And I think the people that we bring to the table need to be a part of the solution in fixing the problem. It's obvious we have a problem. Okay, we do have standards, as Jacqueline said, but I know here, and I don't know how it works over in Canada, normally there's a union for the policemen that they end up bringing them back. Mm-hmm. There needs to be something done that will put some, what's the word that I'm looking for here? There needs to be something done that will put into play a process where they're feeling the pain for what they do.
Amen.
Maybe today, let's just say somebody goes and sues the police that comes out of the taxpayers' dollars. This is something else I got from somebody today. See, that's why these conversations matter.
Yeah.
One of the things they came out with was, well, maybe we should take it out of the police retirement fund. And if it hits them, it's going to hit their pocket. Maybe that'll be a reason for them to stop. But we need to come up with something that is going to go back at them to make them want to stop. And as I said before, when they put on that uniform, for some reason, everything underneath that uniform is forgotten, or maybe they didn't go out and investigate it. But I mean, these are ongoing things. And look at it. The people, the policemen that have actually done this, it's not their first time. It's reoccurring. Yeah. It's reoccurring because the union is constantly bringing these people back. Mm-hmm. It's reoccurring. What do you do with the union? Or maybe the union needs to be a part of the process. I don't know. but something needs to be done. And I can only give you or lead you so far, because Conversations That Matter is not going to give you the answer. It's going to help you get to the answer.
Amen. Amen.
But we need to come up with a better process.
And I'm reading your quote, words are the seeds. Oh, you just took it off. Sorry.
I can take it back on.
Once you put back that on. And it really resonates with me. It says words are the seeds within every conversation, and intent is the fertilizer. And I think that's the key right there, is we have to look at intent. We have to look at what is my intention when I sit and speak to a particular subject. What is my intent when I don the uniform? What is my intent when I engage in conversation with the community? Is my intent to harm? Is my intent to cause harm? Or is my intent to cause harmony, to cause building of relations? What exactly is the intent in everything that we do in life? And don't get me wrong, we can't just say my intent wasn't to kill you. My intent was, there's still an accountability.
Yes.
After we have defined that intent. And to echo what you were saying in terms of the labor partners, they are the ones that should not want people who are doing wrong by the profession to be in the profession.
Right. So that's another thing I don't understand. It's like, okay, I understand your job, you're the union, but why do you keep bringing these people back that are doing wrong?
Yeah. But I do understand something.
Representing you, they're the ones that should be pulling them aside. I mean, I remember as a child, God rest her soul, my grandmother used to say, listen to me. Don't let nobody come and tell me that you did wrong out there,
There you go.
Listen, don't you go out there and embarrass me, because
there
if
you go. And they didn't have a problem coming to the school. They did not have a problem coming to the school with a belt. I'm telling you, they did not. If you wear and she would come, the wig would be lopsided. She would have on a house coat, the robe. I mean, however they caught her is how she came to the school. And believe me, you didn't want her coming to the school often.
That's exactly right. And I mean, we say, with all due respect to everyone that is hurting right now, and I think the laughter that we've shared together today does not negate the pain that we are carrying around. It does not negate the pain that we're carrying around. What it does, though, is it proves or confirms that when you're amongst people where you see that things can happen, when you collectively are working towards a goal, it brings out that positivity.
Yes.
In all of us. So it doesn't negate. People are hurting right now, but I think I want to build on what Miss Sonya said earlier, is that don't allow your hurt to turn you into the very thing that you're fighting against.
That's right.
Okay?
Yes.
Don't do that, because those shop owners and those individuals whose livelihood now will be affected had nothing to do with Mr. Floyd's death.
Correct.
They had nothing
from Mr. Floyd.
Yes, yes.
And Mr. Floyd, may he rest in his soul rest in peace by God's grace. Mr. Floyd is not with us on this earth anymore, but his families are still here with us. This issue is still here with us. So we need to sit down, and the intent that we want to see happen, we need to come together. The faith leaders, Miss Sonya, that's the other community
yes.
we need to hear from. Where are our faith leaders?
Where are our leaders? That's the problem. That's the question. Where are our leaders? And when we come up with this new process, what this new process needs to address is, we want to be able to put out these things when they're flames. We want to put them out while they're small. We don't want to wait until they turn into these forest fires and we're where we are today. So whatever the process is, we have to address it while it's little. And I don't know where the leaders are. No one wants to speak on the subject, but this is the time to speak because this is how we got to where we are. This is exactly how we got to where we are, by not talking, not having conversations, not having dialogue. So in order to fix this, okay, we need everybody at the table. We need to have conversations that matter.
And
In the show.
for taking this initiative, Rebecca, in putting this forum together and all that you're doing. You're saying that you don't feel that you're doing. You are doing.
You are.
you are doing.
Well, and we need to come back to finish up the second question. Family civility.
Well, you know what? I hope that this incident will be resolved, and I hope we don't have to come back. But if this is not resolved, and if Mr. Floyd's death does not lead to a solution, we have to come back again, and we will come back, and we will come back, and we will come back until somebody hears us who needs to be heard.
Praise the Lord.
And it's through these conversations, and I cannot thank you enough. I cannot, Miss Jackie, you do so much every day for keeping us safe and giving those second chances to those who have committed a crime and recognizing civility to them. You've taught me so much in that perspective. And, Dr. Robinson, we'll just have to keep the conversation that matters going. And thank you.
And we will.
I have learned a lot today, and I will keep the conversation going, at least with my children and in my realm, to say, no, we need to talk about this. We can't just act on it. Because I can tell you, my cousin is bringing it up. I can tell who does it, but not everybody's bringing it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we all need to be a part of the solution in order to get it working. Thank
you. Let's Talk Family Civility today has been amazing. Mrs. Jacqueline Edwards, from the first Black female president, the first female president, and of the Association of Black Law Enforcers, ABLE. If you want more information about ABLE, go to able.org.
Yes.
Correct? Able.org, and you can actually if you're interested in becoming a member, you can be your law enforcer all over the world. You can become a member. And Dr. Robinson, what your website to go to?
They can just go find me on Facebook, and that's Sonya Robinson on Facebook, or they can inbox me.
And please keep the conversation going. And Family Civility, it is creating the universal design for family, and a family that is accepted no matter of their age, their race, their gender, or their sexuality. We're going to love, support, and be civil. And have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.